Welcome to a series where I plan to talk about every single relationship in Gochiusa. Not relationship in the romantic sense, mind you, just every connection. Now, when it comes to the friendships in this show, we all know what the most integral part of Gochiusa is. No matter who your favorite character is, no matter what your favorite interactions are, no one can deny that the core of the show is Coco Chino. After all, the whole premise of the show is Cocoa moving in with Chino. And that's exactly why I'm not going to start this series with that episode. To some, it just might feel like I'm retreading old ground. I will get to that episode, but first let's talk CocoRize. These two seemingly have no special synergy at first. After all, what could stand out when you're being compared to Coco Chino and Rize Shero? They're close, of course, but so are the rest of the main five, and arguably the beans too. So what, if anything, does CocoRize have going for it? I'm not gonna sit here and argue that their dynamics are as squeal-inducing as Rize Shero or as prominent as Coco Chino, but in my opinion, that's where some of the charm comes from. Now, I will elaborate on that, but for now, let's get into the specifics. As for the general nature of their relationship, I think Cocoa specifically stands out compared to Rize's interactions with the rest of the cast. When we first see Rize, she's kind but distant. In fact, if we go into the movie, seeing even earlier into the timeline, Rize's mannerisms only let her be kind indirectly, using her dad as an excuse to give Chino a handmade stuffed animal, and dragging her along for exercises. Rize definitely has a complex or two, and one of those is a really competitive spirit. A Day in Search of E tells us that much. And she's insanely competent to back up her drive. As a result, everyone around her seems to have put her on a pedestal. They all admire Rize as some superhuman overachiever, which results in no one really challenging her. After all, there would be no competition, so what's the point? And thus, Rize slowly accepted the distance put between her and others. Enter Cocoa. At first, Cocoa is also impressed by Rize's skills, but unlike the others who see Rize as above them in some way, Cocoa just sees her as another girl, which Rize has yet another complex about. She didn't even notice that Rize was a year older than her. Cocoa is constantly challenging Rize on things, even if she doesn't think she can win, because she doesn't care about winning or losing. She's just having fun. And that contrast of Rize's complicated worries about her self-image and Cocoa's intense not giving a shit really makes for some great interactions and a heartwarming dynamic. As a result, the rest of the girls start to see Rize as she really is, a regular human who works really hard. They appreciate her inhuman skill, but they also acknowledge the human who acquired them. The distance between them starts to close, and we get a great episode like Stamp, Sleep, Study, Smile. For some specific interactions, there are a lot of Rabbit House Squad interactions, but not many specific CocoRize moments, at least in the anime. Volume 2, Chapter 10 has Rize say something along the lines of, "I get lonely sometimes, so you can come over and be my big sister." And they also have a bonding moment when Chino first brings Maya and Megu to Rabbit House, and while walking around town, Cocoa tells Chino that she would love to ride a bike one day, but she would first need to learn how. Volume 3, Chapter 1 actually gives us this bike riding chapter with none other than Cocoa and Rize. Notice how 2/3 of those interactions are manga only. As you may know, the manga and anime are not a one-to-one recreation, with the anime going more in-depth on some of the stories and completely leaving out others. For example, the entire storyline leading up to the Volume 2 Chapter 10 moment was never adapted. As for the bike riding chapter, in the anime they only mention how Cocoa wants to learn how to ride a bike, they never show her actually learning. As for why, I don't think they have a vendetta against CocoRize or anything. It's probably just that they didn't want to animate Cocoa pulling off a sick drift. And now for why I like it. Cocoa and Rize have a classic straight man funny man dynamic, with Cocoa often dragging Rize into her shenanigans. That by itself is entertaining and fun to watch, but there's more going on behind the scenes. Like I said before, CocoRize isn't a super loud or prevalent relationship. It's more low-key, and that's almost the point. Cocoa treats Rize as she would any other person, and at first she's the only person to do that. By not even noticing that Rize is a year above her, Cocoa, intentionally or not, establishes them as equals, or at least peers, and thus assures Rize that she's normal. Among Cocoa's relationships, her friendship with Rize is pretty normal. It doesn't stand out, and the fact that she doesn't get special treatment is what makes it stand out so much among Rize's relationships. Hi, Editing Chorky here. Earlier I said I didn't really know if it was intentional or not that Cocoa helps Rize feel more normal, but I'm definitely leaning towards intentional. This sort of plays into my theory that Cocoa is always playing 5D chess 3 steps ahead, always knows what you need to hear, how you need to hear it, and how she should say it. And my proof is Season 1, Episode 1. We first get Cocoa weirded out by Rize pulling a gun on her in her underwear, which is fair enough. But after that, we get Rize struggling to pick up a normal amount of coffee beans, and I think Cocoa notices. After that, when Rize tells Cocoa she memorized the menu in one go, Cocoa finds it impressive, but also drops the fact that she has a special skill of her own, being really good at math. I think this helped assure Rize that even if you have a special skill, you can still be normal, or at least however normal you can consider Cocoa. Anyways, back to the video. In Season 3, we get told that Rize is aiming to be a school teacher, and while she's embarrassed, everyone around her is supportive. She says that she came to that conclusion because she enjoyed spending so much time with Chimamete. But I think it's Cocoa who also helped break down her preconceived notions about what she could and could not be. So I guess in summary, Cocoa knows just how to play into Rize's complexes, whether she means to or not, and helped her become more open with the rest of the cast. One of my favorite friendships in Gochiusa. It's not the star of every episode, but when it does show up, it's quite the treat.